Imagine your financial advisor called you tomorrow and said, I have a great opportunity. I want to put 85% of your entire net worth into a single asset. It's illiquid. You can't sell part of it, you can't access the value quickly, and if you need money urgently, you'll have to take out a loan against it. Oh, and it requires ongoing maintenance costs, property taxes, and insurance just to hold it. Interested? You'd say no immediately. That's not investing. That's concentration risk. Any advisor who suggested putting 85% of your net worth into a single illiquid asset would lose your trust on the spot. But here's the thing. That's exactly what most people do when they buy a house. And not only do they do it willingly, they celebrate it. They get congratulated for it. The entire transaction is structured to make it feel like the smartest financial decision of their lives. Nobody in that transaction, not the agent, not the mortgage broker, not the bank, asks the question that actually determines whether it was a good financial decision. Not, can you afford the mortgage? Not, do you have enough for the down payment? But, what percentage of your total net worth will this house represent after you sign? That number, the concentration of your wealth in a single illiquid asset, is the most important financial metric in the home buying decision. And it's the one that almost never gets discussed. Today I want to change that. What concentration risk actually means. Let me start with the concept, because it's one that most people understand in theory, but rarely apply to their own situation. In investing, concentration risk refers to what happens when too much of your wealth is tied up in a single asset or a single category of assets. The danger is straightforward. If that asset performs badly, a disproportionate amount of your wealth suffers. If it becomes inaccessible, a disproportionate amount of your wealth becomes inaccessible. The more concentrated your wealth in any single thing, the more vulnerable you are to whatever happens to that thing. This is why diversification is one of the foundational principles of investing. Spread your wealth across different assets, different sectors, different geographies. If one goes down, the others may not. Your overall position is resilient because no single outcome can destroy it. Now apply that principle honestly to how most people hold their wealth. The conventional wisdom in investing says you shouldn't have more than 5 to 10% of your portfolio in any single stock. The logic is clear. You're protecting yourself against company-specific risk, against the possibility that one bad decision or one bad quarter destroys a significant portion of what you've built. But the average American homeowner has somewhere between 60 and 90% of their net worth tied up in a single asset, their primary residence. Not a diversified real estate portfolio, not a collection of properties across different markets. One house, in one neighborhood, in one city, subject to one local economy. By the standard that everyone agrees is prudent for stocks, this is extraordinarily concentrated. And yet, it's not only accepted, it's encouraged, celebrated, and treated as the definition of financial responsibility. The question worth asking is, why? The number that actually matters. Here's the framework I want you to take from this conversation, because it's the one that changes how you evaluate every housing decision. Your house is not your net worth. It is one asset within your net worth. And the question that determines whether buying it was a smart decision is not whether you could afford the mortgage, it's what percentage of your total wealth that single asset represents. Financial planners and wealth managers who work with genuinely wealthy clients, people who have built substantial, durable wealth over time, generally suggest that a primary residence should represent no more than 20 to 30% of total net worth. Some would say even less. Think about what that means in practice. If your net worth is $500,000, that framework suggests your house should cost somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000. Or that by the time you buy the $400,000 house, you should have enough invested elsewhere that the house represents only that portion of the total. For most first-time buyers, that number looks nothing like reality. The typical first-time buyer has saved aggressively for a down payment, has relatively modest investment accounts, and uses the down payment, which may represent the majority of their liquid savings, to purchase a house that immediately becomes the dominant asset in their net worth by an enormous margin. A $400,000 house purchased with an $80,000 down payment by someone with $100,000 total in savings leaves that person with a net worth structure where the house represents roughly 80% of everything they own. The remaining 20% is liquid, but only barely, and it needs to cover emergencies, ongoing costs, and everything else life requires. That is not wealth. That is a very large single asset position with a mortgage attached to it. Why this matters more than the monthly payment. The reason the concentration question matters more than the mortgage payment question is that the mortgage payment tells you about cash flow, whether you can service the debt month to month. Concentration tells you about resilience, whether your overall financial position can survive the things that inevitably happen. Consider what a high concentration position actually means for your life. If you lose your job, you have very limited runway. Your savings are mostly in the house, which you can't access quickly or cheaply. The mortgage payment continues regardless of whether income does. The margin for error is thin because almost everything you have is locked in the one asset that requires you to keep paying to hold it. If the housing market in your area declines, and housing markets do decline, sometimes significantly, your net worth takes a disproportionate hit. A 20% drop in house value on a $400,000 house is an $80,000 loss. For someone whose total liquid net worth is $20,000, that $80,000 paper loss represents everything they have and then some. The concentration means that one market movement can effectively erase years of wealth building. If you need money for a major expense, a medical event, a family emergency, a business opportunity, you can't easily access your equity. You can take out a home equity loan or a HELOC, but that means going back into debt against an asset you're already paying off, paying interest to borrow your own wealth. The illiquidity of the asset means the wealth is there in theory and largely inaccessible in practice. None of these are hypothetical concerns. They are the normal, predictable risks of life. And a portfolio that's 80% concentrated in a single illiquid asset is poorly positioned to handle any of them. What wealthy people actually do. Here's something that tends to surprise people when they look at how genuinely wealthy individuals actually allocate their assets. Wealthy people do not put 80% of their net worth into their primary residence. They typically own homes, often nice ones, but the home represents a relatively modest percentage of their total wealth. The bulk of their assets is in investments, stocks, bonds, businesses, investment properties, diversified holdings across multiple asset classes. This is not because wealthy people don't value their homes. It's because they understand the difference between a home and an investment, and they don't conflate the two. A primary residence is a place to live. It has genuine value, stability, community, the ability to make it your own, freedom from landlords. Those are real benefits worth paying for. But they are lifestyle benefits, not investment returns. The fact that the house may appreciate over time doesn't make it an investment in the financial sense, any more than buying a car that holds its value makes the car a stock. Wealthy people build real estate wealth through investment properties, assets they rent out, assets they buy and sell strategically, assets that generate income rather than requiring it. Their primary home is separate from this. It's sized for their life, not for maximum leverage. And crucially, they continue investing in liquid, diversified assets alongside the mortgage. The house doesn't crowd out everything else. It's one item in a portfolio, not the portfolio itself. The result, over time, is that the house becomes a progressively smaller percentage of their net worth, not because it loses value, but because the other assets grow. The concentration risk decreases naturally as wealth builds around it. The liquidity problem. Let me spend a moment on liquidity specifically, because I think it's the aspect of this that's most underappreciated. Liquidity is the ability to convert an asset to cash quickly without significant loss of value. Stocks are highly liquid. You can sell them in minutes. Cash is perfectly liquid. Real estate is among the least liquid major assets available to individual investors. Selling a house takes months from listing to closing. It involves transaction costs, agent commissions, closing costs, transfer taxes that typically consume 6 to 8% of the sale price. It requires finding a buyer willing to pay the price you need at the time you need to sell, which is not guaranteed. And if you need to sell in a down market, you may realize significantly less than the paper value of your equity. What this means practically is that the 80% of your net worth tied up in your house is not 80% of your wealth in any functional sense. It's 80% of a number on a spreadsheet that you can only realize under specific conditions, at significant cost, over a significant timeline. Compare this to an investment portfolio. If you have $200,000 in an index fund and you need $20,000 for an emergency, you sell $20,000 worth of the fund. 3 business days later, the money is in your account. You still have $180,000 working for you. The transaction costs are minimal. If you have $200,000 in home equity and you need $20,000 for an emergency, your options are sell the house, which takes months and costs thousands, or take out a loan against the equity, which means going into additional debt and paying interest on money that is theoretically already yours. Equity is not cash. It's not even close to cash. And treating a highly illiquid asset as the primary store of your wealth means that most of your wealth is not really available to you in the moments when you need wealth most. The case for renting while you build. Here's the advice that nobody in the home buying industry will give you, because nobody in the home buying industry profits when you decide not to buy. If buying a house would put more than 50 to 60% of your net worth into that single asset, if it would leave you with limited liquid savings, thin emergency buffers, and almost no investment portfolio, you should seriously consider not buying yet. Not never. Yet. The case for renting while you build net worth is mathematical, not emotional. Let me show you what it looks like. Suppose you have $120,000 saved and you're considering buying a $400,000 house. You'd put $80,000 down, keep $40,000 liquid, and immediately have 80% plus of your net worth in the house. You're now highly concentrated, thinly liquid, and vulnerable to the range of risks we've discussed. The alternative, you rent for 3 to 5 years. You invest the $80,000 down payment in a diversified portfolio, earning 8% annually. And you invest the difference between what renting costs and what owning would have cost: mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, every month. After 5 years, your $80,000 has grown to approximately $117,000. Your monthly investment contributions have added significantly to that. Your total investable assets might be $200,000 or more, depending on the spread between renting and owning costs in your market. Now you buy the same $400,000 house, assuming prices haven't moved significantly, which is a real variable worth tracking. But now your net worth is $280,000 to $300,000, and the house represents perhaps 55 to 60% of it rather than 80% plus. You're better capitalized, more liquid, and better positioned to handle whatever comes next. And here's the thing that the renting is throwing money away narrative consistently ignores. You were living somewhere during those 3 to 5 years. You were not throwing rent money away any more than you were throwing away the interest on your mortgage, which, in the early years of a home loan, is the majority of your monthly payment. Rent is the cost of shelter. Mortgage interest is also the cost of shelter. Neither one builds equity. What builds equity is the principal portion of your mortgage payment, and in the early years, that's a small fraction of what you pay each month. What builds wealth is investing the difference between renting and owning costs in assets that compound. And for many people in many markets, the math on renting and investing genuinely competes with or beats the math on buying, particularly when you factor in the concentration risk, the illiquidity, and the ongoing costs of ownership. The decision to rent while building is not a failure. It's not falling behind. It is a deliberate financial strategy, delaying a major purchase until the math actually supports it, rather than making the purchase because the bank approved you and the cultural script says it's time. The right question before you buy. Let me give you the framework that should govern every housing decision, because I think it's more useful than any specific number. Before signing anything, answer these questions honestly. After this purchase, what percentage of my total net worth will be in this house? If the answer is above 60%, you are taking on significant concentration risk. If it's above 80%, you should seriously reconsider the timing. After this purchase, what is my liquid net worth? Not total net worth, liquid net worth. Cash, investments, accessible savings. If the answer is less than 6 months of expenses plus a meaningful investment buffer, you're thinly capitalized in a way that makes you vulnerable to normal life events. If my income stopped tomorrow, how long could I service this mortgage? If the answer is less than 6 months, the position is fragile regardless of what the bank approved. Am I buying this house because the math supports it, or because it feels like the right time, the right price, or the right thing to do? The cultural pressure around homeownership is real and powerful. It can make a financially premature decision feel like a responsible one. And finally, what would my net worth look like in 10 years if I bought versus if I rented and invested the difference? Run both scenarios? Actually run them. The answer might surprise you, and it might confirm that buying is the right call. But the calculation deserves to be made before the decision, not rationalized afterward. What this actually looks like. Long term. Let me leave you with the picture of what gets built when someone approaches homeownership this way versus the conventional way. Person A buys as soon as they can qualify. House is 85% of net worth at purchase. They service the mortgage faithfully for 30 years, make minimal investments alongside it because the mortgage consumes most of the margin. At retirement, the house is paid off and worth $800,000. Their investment portfolio is $200,000. Total net worth, $1 million, but 80% of it is still in the house, still illiquid, still generating no income. Person B rents for 5 years while building investments, then buys when the house represents 40% of net worth. They continue investing aggressively alongside the mortgage because the lower concentration left room to do so. At retirement, the house is worth $700,000, slightly less appreciation because they bought later, but their investment portfolio is $900,000. Total net worth, $1,600,000. And 60% of it is liquid, income generating, and accessible. Same income, same general trajectory. A $600,000 difference in retirement wealth, and dramatically different financial flexibility throughout the journey. The house is not the enemy of wealth. Concentration is, illiquidity is. The premature commitment of a disproportionate share of your net worth to a single asset before the rest of your financial position is strong enough to support it. That's what costs people. Buy the house. But buy it when the math works, not when the bank says you qualify, not when the cultural calendar says it's time. When your net worth is large enough that the house is a meaningful but not dominant part of it. When buying it makes you better positioned, not just differently positioned. That's when homeownership becomes what everyone says it is, a foundation for wealth. Until then, renting while building is not falling behind. It's running the right race.